Commander Zektar pressed his four-fingered hand against the cold metal console of the bridge. The lights of the Imperial battlecruiser Hegemony's Pride cast long shadows across his green-scaled face. He had been patrolling Sector 7 Delta for 3 months now, and nothing interesting ever happened out here. The outer rim was quiet, just the way the Empire liked it. His second officer, Lieutenant Vexia, looked up from her station. Her purple eyes showed concern. "Commander, we are getting a strange signal from the monitoring station." Zektar turned toward her. The monitoring station was a small outpost that watched this part of space. It was supposed to report any ships that came through without proper Imperial codes. What kind of signal? "They say there is an unknown ship on their sensors. It appeared about 10 minutes ago." Vexia touched her console and the main screen lit up with data. "The ship is not responding to normal calls." This was unusual. All ships in Imperial space had to follow strict rules. They needed permission to travel between sectors. Any ship without proper codes was either a smuggler or worse. Zektar had dealt with smugglers before. They usually ran away as soon as they saw an Imperial warship. "Show me what we know about this ship," he said. The screen changed to show a technical readout. The unknown vessel was medium-sized, about half the length of their battlecruiser. But something was wrong with the design. Zektar had served in the Imperial Navy for 20 years. He knew every type of ship used by the Empire and its enemies. This ship looked different from anything he had ever seen. "The shape is very strange," Vexia said, pointing at the screen. "Look at these lines. They are too sharp, too aggressive. Most ships are built for efficiency, but this one looks like it was built for war." Zektar studied the image. The ship had a long, narrow body with what looked like weapon ports along both sides. The front came to a sharp point like the head of a spear. Dark metal covered the entire hull, making it hard to see against the black of space. "Energy readings?" he asked. "Very high," Vexia replied. "Much higher than a ship that size should have. Their power source is putting out energy levels we usually only see on Imperial dreadnoughts." This was becoming more interesting and more dangerous. Zektar felt his scales shift color slightly, a sign of stress among his people. "Any idea who built it?" "No matches in our database, Commander. The design is completely unknown." Before Zektar could respond, the communications officer spoke up. "Sir, the monitoring station is calling again. They say the unknown ship is trying to communicate." "Put them through," Zektar ordered. The voice of Station Commander Yalara came through the speakers. She sounded nervous. "Commander Zektar, this is very strange. The ship responded to our hails, but the message makes no sense." "What did they say?" "They said they are lost. But Commander, they also said something that cannot be right. They claim to be human." The bridge went silent. Even the usual hum of the ship's engines seemed to fade away. Zektar felt his blood turn cold. Every officer on the bridge was staring at him, waiting for his response. Humans were a story told to children. A scary tale about a species that had tried to fight the Empire long ago. According to the stories, humans had been wiped out hundreds of years ago. Their planet had been destroyed as a lesson to other species about what happened when you opposed Imperial rule. "Did you say human?" Zektar asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, Commander. The exact message was, Human Vessel UES Retribution. We are lost." They repeated it 3 times before going silent again. Zektar looked around his bridge. His crew was young, most of them born long after the human wars. To them, humans were just a myth. But Zektar was older. He had heard the real stories from officers who had served during those dark times. Stories they were not supposed to tell. "Commander," Vexia said quietly, "humans are extinct. The history books say so. This must be some kind of trick." "Maybe," Zektar replied, but he was not so sure. He had once served under an old admiral who had fought in the human wars. Late one night, after too much drink, the admiral had told him things that were not in any history book. He had said that some human ships had escaped before their world was destroyed. He had said that sometimes Imperial patrols found empty ships drifting in space, ships that looked like they had been torn apart by weapons no one understood. "Sir," the communications officer said. "What should we tell them?" Zektar thought for a moment. If this was really a human ship, then everything they knew about the galaxy might be wrong. Humans were supposed to be dead. If they were alive, where had they been hiding? What had they been doing all these years? "Tell the monitoring station to keep watching the ship, but do not approach it," he ordered. "We need to report this to Fleet Command immediately." As his crew carried out his orders, Zektar stared at the image of the strange ship on his screen. The UES Retribution. Even the name sounded dangerous. Human ships had always had names like that. Names that spoke of war and revenge. He opened a secure channel to Admiral Crixnall at Fleet Headquarters. The Admiral was the only person he could think of who might know what to do about this situation. She was old enough to remember the human wars, and she had access to classified information that regular commanders like him were not allowed to see. While he waited for the connection, Zektar thought about what this could mean. If humans were still alive, why had they stayed hidden for so long? Why were they showing themselves now? And why here in this quiet sector where nothing ever happened? The screen lit up with Admiral Crixnall's face. She looked tired, as she always did these days. The weight of commanding the Third Fleet was heavy, and it showed in the lines around her yellow eyes. "What is it, Commander?" she asked. "This better be important. I have 3 other emergencies to deal with today. Admiral, we have a situation. An unknown ship has entered Sector 7 Delta. It claims to be human." The change in Admiral Crixnall's expression was immediate. The tiredness disappeared, replaced by something that looked like fear. "Human, are you certain?" The ship identified itself as the UES Retribution. The design matches no known vessel type. Energy readings are extremely high. Admiral Crixnall was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was very serious. "Commander, I want you to maintain a safe distance from that ship. Do not attempt to board it or scan it directly. I am sending additional ships to your location." "Admiral, with respect, is there something I should know about this situation?" "Yes, Commander, there is. But not over an open channel. Maintain your position and wait for my ships. That is a direct order." The screen went dark, leaving Zektar alone with his thoughts and his worried crew. Outside the bridge windows, space looked the same as it always had. Peaceful, empty, safe. But now there was something out there in the darkness, something that should not exist. Something that might change everything they thought they knew about the galaxy. The UES Retribution waited in the void, silent and mysterious like a ghost from a forgotten past that had suddenly returned to haunt the living. Admiral Crixnall sat in her private office, staring at the classified file that had not been opened in over 50 years. The security seal glowed red on her screen, warning that the information inside was restricted to the highest levels of Imperial command. Her hands shook slightly as she entered her authorization codes. The file opened with a simple title: Operation Final Solution, Human Elimination Protocol, Status Report 2387. She had hoped never to see these files again. 300 years had passed since the human wars ended. 300 years of peace and expansion for the Empire. 300 years of lies. The first document showed an image that made her stomach turn. It was Earth, the human homeworld, burning under orbital bombardment. The blue and green planet was covered in fire and smoke. Imperial dreadnoughts hung in space above it like giant metal vultures, their weapons turning cities into glass and ash. But Crixnall knew something that most Imperial citizens did not. The bombardment of Earth had been a show, a terrible display of power meant to scare other species into submission. The real goal had been different. Intelligence reports from that time showed that billions of humans had died. Yes, but millions had escaped. She scrolled through the old reports. Human evacuation ships had fled into deep space during the attack. They had scattered in all directions, disappearing into the void between star systems. The Empire had tried to hunt them down, but space was vast and the humans had been clever. They had used their ship's speed and their knowledge of dangerous regions where Imperial vessels could not safely travel. "Computer, show me all reports of human contact since 2387, she commanded. The screen filled with files, hundreds of them. Each one was marked with the highest security classification. Each one told the same story. Imperial patrols would spot strange ships in deep space, ships that moved too fast and fought with weapons that defied understanding. When Imperial forces tried to investigate, the ships would vanish into regions of space where no sane captain would follow. One report from 50 years ago caught her attention. A mining ship had been attacked near the Galactic Edge. The survivors described their attackers as using ships that seemed to bend space around them, weapons that could tear holes in reality itself. They had taken the mining ship's cargo, but they had also done something else. They had freed the alien slaves working in the mines. Another report from 20 years ago described a convoy that had been intercepted while carrying prisoners to a labor camp. The attacking ships had appeared from nowhere, disabled the escort vessels without destroying them, freed the prisoners, and disappeared again. The only message they left behind was a single word broadcasted on all frequencies. Remember. Crixnell leaned back in her chair. The pattern was clear. The humans had not just survived. They had been watching. They had been learning. And they had been growing stronger. Her personal communicator chimed. Admiral, this is Commander Zektar. The situation in Sector 7 Delta has changed. Report, she ordered. The human ship has moved. It is no longer alone. Our long-range sensors are detecting additional vessels approaching from outside the sector. At least 6, possibly more. Crixnell felt her blood turn cold. How many ships are we talking about, Commander? Unknown, Admiral. They are using some kind of stealth technology. Our sensors can barely detect them, and only because they seem to want us to know they are there. This was worse than she had feared. If the humans were revealing themselves now, after 3 centuries of hiding, it meant something had changed. Something that made them willing to risk exposure to the Empire's vast military machine. Admiral, Zektar continued, there is something else. We intercepted a transmission between the human ships. It was in their old language, but our computers were able to translate part of it. They mentioned something called the Devourer, fleet and coordinates, or what they called Convergence Point Alpha. Crixnell had never heard of any Devourer fleet, but the words made her feel uneasy. She pulled up the Empire's long-range sensor reports from the past several years. Most of them showed normal space, the usual background radiation and gravitational patterns that scientists expected to see. But there were anomalies, strange readings from beyond the galactic rim, massive gravitational disturbances that the science division had dismissed as natural phenomena, solar systems going dark for no apparent reason, stars that stopped transmitting light as if something was blocking them out. Commander, I want you to maintain your position, but do not engage the human ships under any circumstances. I am declaring this situation a Code Black emergency. Code Black was the highest level of Imperial alert, reserved for threats to the Empire itself. It had not been used in over 100 years. Crixnell ended the communication and opened another classified file, this one from the current year. It contained reports from the Empire's most distant monitoring stations, outposts at the very edge of known space. Several of these stations had gone silent in recent months. Search ships sent to investigate had found nothing but empty space where entire star systems used to be. The science division had theories. Solar collapse, they said. Natural stellar death cycles happening in clusters. But now, looking at the human ship in Sector 7 Delta and thinking about the intercepted transmission, Crixnell began to suspect something far worse. Her door chimed, and her aide entered. Admiral, the High Command is requesting an immediate briefing on the Sector 7 Delta situation. Tell them I will brief them in 1 hour, and tell them to prepare for a full fleet mobilization. After her aide left, Crixnell opened one final file. This one was not classified because it was considered fiction. A collection of old human stories that had been preserved as curiosities. She found the story she was looking for, one that human parents had supposedly told their children long ago. It was about monsters that came from the dark between stars, creatures that ate entire worlds. The story said that these monsters could only be defeated when all the peoples of the galaxy worked together, setting aside their differences to face a common enemy. At the time, Imperial scholars had dismissed these stories as primitive superstition. Now Crixnell wondered if they had been warnings. She stood up and walked to her window. Outside, space looked peaceful and empty, but she knew that somewhere out there human ships were gathering. Ships built by people who had survived 3 centuries in the harshest regions of space. Ships crewed by the descendants of those who had watched their homeworld burn. The humans had returned. The question was, had they come for revenge or had they come to save them all? Crixnell touched her communicator again. Get me a secure line to all fleet commanders. Emergency authorization Omega-7. As she waited for the connections to establish, she stared at the image of the human ship that Commander Zektar had sent her. The UES Retribution. The name seemed appropriate. After 300 years of hiding and planning, the humans had decided to show themselves again. Whether that was good news or bad news for the Empire remained to be seen. The Imperial Battle Group arrived in Sector 7 Delta 3 days later. Admiral Crixnell commanded from the bridge of her flagship, the massive dreadnought Empire's Wrath. Around her flew 12 battlecruisers, 30 destroyers, and countless smaller support ships. It was enough firepower to conquer a small star system. But as they approached the coordinates where the human ship waited, Crixinal felt no confidence in her superior numbers. The UES Retribution hung motionless in space, as if it had been expecting them all along. Her sensors showed at least 20 other human vessels in the area, though she suspected there were many more hidden from view. "Admiral," her communications officer reported, "the human ship is sending a message. Put it through." A woman's voice came through the speakers. She spoke in perfect galactic standard, though with an accent that sounded ancient and strange. "Imperial Fleet, this is Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earthship Retribution. I request permission to come aboard your flagship for discussions." Crixinal hesitated. Allowing an unknown alien aboard her ship was dangerous, but she had read the old reports about humans. They valued personal meetings and face-to-face negotiations. If she wanted answers, this might be the only way to get them. "Permission granted. Captain Chen, Bay 7 will be prepared for your arrival." 2 hours later, Crixinal stood in the main conference room of her ship, surrounded by her top officers. They had set up the best security equipment the Empire had, sensors that could detect any weapon or harmful device. But when Captain Sarah Chen walked through the door, none of the equipment reacted. The human woman looked young, perhaps 30 years old by Imperial standards. But her eyes were old, ancient, as if she had seen things that aged the soul rather than the body. She wore a simple black uniform with silver trim and no visible weapons. Her hair was dark brown, cut short in a practical style. When she looked at Admiral Crixinal, it was with the gaze of someone who had faced death many times and was no longer afraid of it. "Admiral," Captain Chen said, nodding respectfully. "Thank you for agreeing to meet." "Captain Chen," Crixinal replied carefully. "According to our records, humans have been extinct for 300 years. Perhaps you could explain how you come to be here." Sarah Chen smiled, but there was no humor in it. "Extinct? Is that what your history books say?" She walked to the conference table and placed her hands on its surface. "Admiral, your empire did try to wipe us out. You came very close to succeeding. Earth burned for months under your bombardment. Billions of our people died." The Imperial officers shifted uncomfortably. Even though the human wars had ended long before they were born, the guilt of what their ancestors had done hung in the air like smoke. "But some of us escaped," Chen continued. "We fled into the deep void, into regions of space where your ships could not follow. The Magellan clouds, the dark matter fields, the gravity wells around collapsed stars. We learned to live in places where life should not exist." "How many of you survived?" Crixinal asked. "Enough." Chen's answer was simple but somehow threatening. "We adapted, Admiral. We had to. In the deep void, normal technology does not work. Normal ships cannot survive. So we learned to build different ships. Ships that could bend space and time to our will." As if to demonstrate, Chen touched a device on her wrist. The lights in the conference room dimmed, and through the windows they could see the UES Retribution beginning to change. Its hull shifted and flowed like liquid metal. Parts of the ship folded inward while other sections expanded. In seconds, the vessel had transformed from a sleek warship into something that looked more like a living creature. "Our ships are grown, not built," Chen explained. "They are alive in ways your scientists would not understand. They feed on cosmic radiation and dark energy. They can travel through dimensions that your physics say do not exist." Admiral Crixinal stared out at the transformed ship. "What do you want from us? Revenge?" "Revenge?" Chen laughed, and this time there was genuine amusement in her voice. "Admiral, if we wanted revenge, do you think we would be talking? We have had 300 years to plan. We know the location of every Imperial world, every fleet base, every important target. If we wanted to destroy your empire, it would already be ash floating in space. Then what do you want?" Chen's expression became serious again. "We want to save your lives. All of your lives." She activated another device, and a holographic display appeared above the conference table. It showed the galaxy as seen from far away, with billions of stars arranged in spiral arms. But beyond the galaxy, in the dark space between star systems, something was moving, fast shapes darker than the void itself, approaching from 3 different directions. "The Devourers," Chen said simply. "They have consumed 3 galaxies already. They are coming here next." Crixinal studied the hologram. "What are they?" "We do not know exactly. Some kind of biomechanical hybrid, ships the size of moons crewed by creatures that feed on stellar energy. They arrive at a star system, drain the energy from the sun and move on to the next one. Everything alive dies when the stars go dark. How do you know about this? Because we have been fighting them for 50 years. Chen touched the display and it zoomed in to show battle scenes. Human ships, strange and beautiful, fighting against massive dark shapes that seemed to absorb light itself. We encountered their advanced scouts while exploring beyond the galactic rim. Since then, we have been trying to stop them, slow them down, learn their weaknesses. And have you learned their weaknesses? Some. They can be destroyed, but it takes weapons that can manipulate space-time itself. Conventional energy weapons just feed them. Kinetic weapons bounce off their hulls. You need to attack them at the quantum level, tear apart the very fabric of reality around them. Admiral Crixnall felt her world shifting. Everything she had believed about the galaxy, about the Empire's place in it, was changing. Why are you telling us this? Why offer to help? Chen was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was sad. Because despite what your people did to us, we are not monsters. We do not want to watch entire species die when we could prevent it, and because we cannot win this fight alone. The Devourer main fleet is massive, thousands of ships. We have maybe 300 vessels that can hurt them. We need allies. What kind of allies? Every spacefaring species in the galaxy, united, working together. The Empire controls most of the galaxy, Admiral. Your resources, your shipyards, your billions of people. We need all of it. And in return? Chen smiled grimly. In return, you get to survive. But there are conditions. What conditions? The Empire must change. No more conquest. No more enslaving other species. Every intelligent race becomes equal partners in this alliance. The galaxy unites as free peoples or it dies as slaves. The conference room was silent. Admiral Crixnall looked around at her officers. Some looked angry at the humans' demands. Others looked thoughtful. All of them looked afraid. You are asking us to give up everything the Empire stands for, Crixnall said. I am asking you to choose between your pride and your survival, Chen replied. Because, Admiral, I need to tell you something else. Our sensors show the Devourer advance fleet will reach this sector in 6 months. The main invasion force will arrive in 2 years. 6 months. 6 months. Which means we do not have time for long negotiations or political games. We need a decision now. Unite with us and live, or stay divided and die. Those are the only choices. As if summoned by her words, alarms began sounding throughout the Imperial flagship. The tactical officer looked up from his console, his face pale. Admiral, long-range sensors are detecting massive objects approaching from outside the galactic rim. Energy signatures unlike anything in our database. Captain Chen nodded grimly. It looks like we are out of time for discussion, Admiral. The advanced scouts are here. The bridge of the Empire's wrath erupted into controlled chaos. Officers rushed between stations, checking readings and confirming sensor data. Admiral Crixnall moved to the central command console, her mind racing as she tried to process what was happening. Report, she ordered. Admiral, we have 3 large objects approaching from coordinates 127 Mark 85, the tactical officer announced. They are moving at sublight speed, but their mass readings are enormous. Each one is approximately the size of a small moon. Captain Chen stood beside the Admiral, watching the main display with grim familiarity. Those are scout ships, the smallest class of Devourer vessel. Each one carries about 50,000 of their warrior creatures. 50,000? Admiral Crixnall felt her scales shift to a pale yellow, the color of fear among her people. What do they want? To test your defenses, to see how much resistance they will face when the main fleet arrives. Chen touched her wrist device and her voice was transmitted to all Imperial ships in the battle group. All vessels, this is Captain Chen. What you are about to see will challenge everything you know about warfare. Do not engage until I give the signal. On the main screen, the 3 approaching objects became visible. They were not ships in any sense that Imperial technology understood. They looked like living things. Vast creatures with black skin that seemed to absorb light. Tentacles the size of battleships writhed around their massive bodies. Instead of engines, they had what looked like wings that flapped slowly through space, propelling them forward through means that violated every law of physics. How do they move through space like that? Crixnall asked. They swim through dark matter the way fish swim through water, Chen explained. They exist partially in our dimension and partially in others. That is why conventional weapons do not work against them. The first Devourer scout ship reached the edge of the Imperial battle group's formation. Without warning, it opened what could only be called a mouth. Rows of teeth the size of destroyers became visible, and from deep inside the creature came a sound that somehow transmitted through the vacuum of space. It was like the scream of a dying star. "Admiral, the creature is scanning us," the sensor officer reported. "But the scan is not using any electromagnetic frequencies we recognize. It seems to be examining our souls rather than our ships." Before Crixnall could respond, the Devourer opened fire, but instead of energy beams or missiles, it vomited forth a cloud of smaller creatures, each one the size of a fighter craft, but shaped like insects with crystal wings. They swarmed toward the Imperial fleet with impossible speed. "All ships, evasive maneuvers," Crixnall ordered. "Open fire!" The Imperial battle group responded with everything they had. Energy cannons lit up space with brilliant beams of destruction. Missile salvos filled the void between the fleets. For a moment it looked like the Imperial weapons were working. Several of the smaller creatures exploded in flashes of light. But then the impossible happened. The destroyed creatures reformed, their scattered pieces flowing back together like living liquid. Within seconds, they were whole again and continuing their attack. "Admiral, our weapons are not effective," the tactical officer reported. "Every target we destroy regenerates within moments." The swarm reached the first line of Imperial destroyers. What happened next would haunt the survivors for the rest of their lives. The creatures did not simply attack the ships. They merged with them, flowing through the hull like it was made of water. Inside the ships, crew members began screaming over the communications channels. "They are inside us," came one panicked voice. "They are eating our life energy." I can feel my soul being drained away. One by one, the Imperial ships went dark. Not destroyed, but somehow emptied, drained of all energy and life. They drifted in space like hollow shells, their crews gone without a trace. "Pull back," Crixnall ordered. "All ships retreat to minimum safe distance." But Captain Chen stepped forward. "Admiral, give me control of your fleet communications. It is time to show you what human technology can do." Crixnall hesitated for only a moment before nodding. Chen spoke into the fleet channel, her voice calm despite the chaos around them. "Human fleet, this is Captain Chen. Omega authorization. Engage the enemy." Space around the Devourer scouts suddenly filled with new ships. The human vessels seemed to materialize from nothing, appearing in flashes of twisted light. There were dozens of them, sleek and deadly, their hulls flowing and changing like living metal. The UES Retribution led the attack. As Crixnall watched, the human ship did something that should have been impossible. It fired a weapon that tore a hole in space itself, creating a wound in reality that sucked in light and matter. The hole appeared directly in front of one of the Devourer scouts. For the first time, one of the massive creatures showed pain. It writhed and screamed as parts of its body were pulled into the spatial tear. But instead of trying to escape, it fought back, extending tentacles toward the human ship. "They are trying to drain our ship's energy," Chen said, watching the battle calmly. "But our vessels are powered by controlled singularities. When they try to drain us, they get more energy than they can handle." The Devourer scout suddenly convulsed. Energy patterns ran across its dark skin like lightning. Then with a flash that lit up half the sector, it exploded. But this was not the clean destruction of a ship's reactor. This was the death of something that had been alive for thousands of years. The other two scouts immediately changed their behavior. Instead of attacking, they began to retreat, moving faster than anything their size should be able to move. But the human ships pursued them relentlessly, their weapons tearing new holes in space-time. Within an hour, all 3 Devourer scouts had been destroyed. The space around the Imperial fleet was littered with strange debris that seemed to phase in and out of existence. The smaller creatures that had attacked the Imperial ships dissolved into nothing when their mother ships died. Admiral Crixnall stared at the aftermath in shock. Her mighty battle group, pride of the Imperial Navy, had been helpless against the enemy. But the humans had destroyed 3 massive alien vessels without losing a single ship. Captain Chen turned to face her. "Now you understand what we are dealing with. The scouts you just saw were nothing compared to the main fleet. When the real invasion begins, there will be thousands of ships like those and many that are much larger. How many more humans are there?" Crixnall asked quietly. "Enough to make a difference, but not enough to save the galaxy alone. We need every ship, every world, every person willing to fight. And Admiral, we need them united. The Devourers feed on division and fear. They grow stronger when species fight each other instead of working together. Crixnell looked around her bridge. Her officers were staring at the tactical displays, trying to understand weapons that bent the laws of physics. She thought about the empire she had served all her life, built on conquest and domination. Then she thought about her homeworld, her family, the billions of Imperial citizens who had no idea what was coming for them. What would this alliance look like? She asked. Every species gets equal representation. No slaves, no conquered peoples. All worlds contribute what they can to the defense effort, but no one is forced to give more than they are able. The goal is not to build another empire, but to create something new. A true galactic civilization, and if the empire refuses, Chen's expression was sad but determined, then the empire will die with the rest of the galaxy. We will not force anyone to join us, but we also will not waste resources trying to save people who refuse to save themselves. Admiral Crixnell was quiet for a long moment. Around her, the bridge crew waited for her decision. Outside the windows, the human ships maintained their formation, patient and ready. In the distance, the first stars were beginning to dim as more Devourer scouts approached from the galactic rim. "Captain Chen," she said finally, "I need to speak with the High Command. This decision is beyond my authority to make alone. I understand. But Admiral, remember what you saw here today. Remember that conventional weapons did nothing to these creatures. While human technology destroyed them easily, when you speak to your leaders, make sure they understand that pride is a luxury they can no longer afford." As Captain Chen prepared to return to her ship, she paused at the door of the conference room. "Admiral, there is one more thing you should know. We have been monitoring Imperial communications for decades. We know about your prison camps, your slave worlds, your conquered peoples. If the Empire joins this alliance, all of that has to end. Not just because it is morally right, but because we will need every free mind and willing heart to win this war." After the human captain left, Admiral Crixnell stood alone on her bridge, staring out at the vast darkness of space. Somewhere out there, an enemy beyond imagination was approaching. Behind her lay an empire built on the suffering of others. Ahead lay a choice that would determine the fate of every living thing in the galaxy. The age of empire was ending. The question was, what would rise to take its place? 3 weeks later, Admiral Crixnell stood before the Imperial High Command on the capital world of Hegemonia Prime. The Great Council chamber was filled with the most powerful beings in the galaxy, representatives of dozens of species that had been conquered and absorbed into the Empire over the centuries. But today, for the first time in Imperial history, they were not discussing expansion or new conquests. They were discussing survival. The debate had been raging for days. Some council members wanted to fight the humans and the Devourers both, believing that Imperial technology could overcome any threat. Others argued for negotiating with the Devourers, hoping to find some way to avoid conflict. But a growing number were beginning to see the wisdom in Captain Chen's proposal. "The human demands are impossible," declared General Vorthak, commander of the Imperial Army. "They ask us to free every slave world to treat conquered species as equals. It would mean the end of everything we have built. Everything we have built will end anyway if the Devourers consume our galaxy," replied Councillor Zexara, one of the few representatives of a conquered species who had risen to high rank. "At least this way we have a chance to survive." Admiral Crixnell had presented her report 3 times now, showing them the tactical recordings of the battle in Sector 7 Delta. Each time, the council members watched in stunned silence as Imperial weapons proved useless against the enemy while human technology destroyed the scouts with ease. "The humans have been preparing for this war for 300 years, she said, addressing the council once more. "They have developed weapons and tactics specifically designed to fight these creatures. Without their help, we will all die." Emperor Zarthul, ancient ruler of the Empire, finally spoke. His voice was old and tired, carrying the weight of 8 centuries of rule. "Admiral Crixnell, you have served the Empire faithfully for many years. Do you truly believe we have no choice but to accept these human demands? Your Imperial Majesty, I believe we have a choice between our pride and our existence. We cannot have both." Before the Emperor could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the council chamber. Emergency lights bathed the room in red as urgent messages flashed on the communication screens. "Report," the Emperor ordered. A young officer rushed into the chamber, his face pale with fear. "Your Majesty, we have an emergency. The Devourer main fleet has been detected approaching the outer rim. They are not arriving in 6 months as predicted. They are arriving now. The council chamber erupted in panic. Representatives shouted questions and demands while guards rushed to secure the building. Through it all, Emperor Zarthul remained calm, his ancient eyes fixed on the tactical displays that showed the approaching enemy. The images were terrifying beyond imagination. Thousands of massive bioships moved through space like a living plague, each one larger than an Imperial battle station. Behind them came even larger creatures, things the size of small planets that pulsed with dark energy. Stars along their path were already beginning to dim as the Devourers fed on their energy. "How long do we have?" the Emperor asked. 3 days until they reach the first Imperial outposts, the officer replied. "Maybe a week before they enter the core systems." Emperor Zarthul stood slowly, his ancient frame shaking with the effort. "Send a message to Captain Chen of the human fleet. Tell her that the Empire accepts her terms." "Your Majesty," General Vorthak protested. "We have not had time to properly consider—" "General," the Emperor interrupted, his voice carrying the authority of 800 years of rule. "Look at those screens. Look at what is coming for us. There is no time left for consideration." Within hours, human ships began appearing throughout Imperial space. They moved through dimensions that Imperial science could not understand, arriving at strategic locations faster than any conventional fleet could travel. Captain Chen materialized on Hegemonia Prime with a full diplomatic team, but also with detailed battle plans that had been prepared for decades. The transformation of the Imperial military was swift and brutal. Entire fleets were reorganized around human ships and human tactics. Slave soldiers were freed and asked to fight as equals for their own worlds. Conquered species were given independence and asked to contribute to the galactic defense as free allies rather than forced subjects. Not everyone accepted the changes willingly. Several Imperial governors declared independence rather than free their slave populations. 3 entire battle fleets refused to integrate with human forces and attempted to fight the Devourers using conventional tactics. They were consumed within hours, their crews drained of life energy while their ships became empty hulks drifting in space. But gradually, a new kind of military force began to emerge. Human ships with their reality-warping weapons formed the backbone of the fleet, but they were supported by Imperial vessels upgraded with human technology and crewed by beings who fought not because they were forced to, but because they chose to defend their homes. The first major battle came at the Rigel system, where a Devourer advance force of 50 ships met a combined human Imperial fleet. Admiral Crixnell commanded the Imperial forces while Captain Chen led the human contingent. For the first time in 300 years, human and Imperial ships fought side by side. The battle was unlike anything in recorded history. The Devourers tried their usual tactics, sending swarms of energy-draining creatures to disable enemy ships. But the human vessels tore holes in space-time that consumed the attackers, while Imperial ships equipped with human shields proved immune to the life-draining effects. The Devourers adapted quickly, bringing forth larger creatures and more powerful weapons, but the Allied fleet adapted faster. Human technology allowed instant communication across vast distances, coordinating attacks with precision that the Devourers could not match. When one section of the fleet was overwhelmed, reinforcements arrived through dimensional gates that appeared from nowhere. The battle lasted 18 hours. When it was over, the Devourer advance force had been completely destroyed while the Allied fleet had lost only 12 ships. But everyone knew this was just the beginning. Captain Chen and Admiral Crixnell met aboard the UES Retribution after the battle. Through the ship's windows, they could see the debris field that had once been an enemy fleet. Strange organic matter that dissolved into energy even as they watched. "We won this battle," Chen said quietly, "but the main fleet is still coming. Intelligence reports suggest they have over 10,000 ships, some of them larger than anything we face today. Will we be ready?" Crixnell asked. "We have to be. The alternative is extinction." Chen pulled up a holographic display showing the galaxy. Thousands of red dots marked Devourer positions while blue dots showed Allied forces. Every day more species join our alliance. The Andromedans arrived yesterday with a fleet of crystal ships that can phase through matter. The machine intelligences from the galactic core have contributed AI-controlled vessels that never tire and never make mistakes. And the Empire is changing. Slowly, but it is changing. Your people are learning that strength comes not from conquering others, but from inspiring them to fight beside you. Chen smiled, and for the first time since their first meeting, it seemed genuine. 300 years ago, humans and Imperials were sworn enemies. Today we stand together against the darkness. If we can change that much, we can change anything. Admiral Crixnall looked out at the stars, many of which were already dimming as the main Devourer fleet approached. Do you really think we can win this war? I think we can try, and sometimes that is enough. Captain Chen touched a control and the ship's hull became transparent, giving them a perfect view of space around them. In every direction, Allied ships were taking position, preparing for the greatest battle in galactic history. Look out there, Admiral. Humans, Imperials, Andromedans, machine minds, energy beings, species we do not even have names for yet. All of them choosing to fight together rather than die alone. It is beautiful, Crixnall admitted. Yes, it is. And that beauty, that choice to stand together in the face of extinction, that is what we are really fighting for. Not just our lives, but our right to choose who we want to become. As they watched, more ships continued to arrive. The greatest fleet in galactic history was assembling, not through conquest or coercion, but through choice. Free beings choosing to defend freedom itself. In the distance, the stars continued to dim as the Devourer main fleet approached. The real war was about to begin. But for the first time in 300 years, humanity was not alone. And for the first time in its history, the galaxy was truly united. The age of empires was ending. The age of alliance had begun. Whether it would be enough to save them all remained to be seen. But as Captain Sarah Chen had said, sometimes the choice to try was enough. Sometimes the act of standing together in the darkness was itself a victory, regardless of the outcome. The final battle for the galaxy was coming. But they would face it together as equals, as allies, as one people divided among many worlds but united in their determination to survive and to protect what they loved. The human ships waited in the darkness, their crews ready for whatever came next. Beside them, Imperial vessels held position, their commanders no longer conquerors but defenders.